The small town of Clearwater, Minnesota was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, where doors were left unlocked, and life moved at a peaceful, predictable pace. Surrounded by dense forests and pristine lakes, it was a haven for outdoor enthusiasts and those seeking refuge from the chaos of urban life. But in the summer of 2017, the tranquility of Clearwater was shattered, leaving its residents grappling with fear and unease. It began with a discovery that would forever alter the town's history. A group of hikers, enjoying a sunny day at Pine Lake, stumbled upon something no one could have anticipated. Just off a secluded trail, hidden beneath a thin layer of leaves, they found the mutilated body of a man. The sight was so horrific that one of the hikers fainted while another immediately called the authorities. The victim was later identified as 25-year-old Daniel Harris, a local college student who had been reported missing 2 weeks earlier. He had been hiking alone, something he often did to clear his mind. But this time, his solitary adventure had taken a tragic turn. The condition of his body sent shockwaves through the police department. It wasn't just a murder, it was something far more disturbing. Over the next few months, Clearwater's once idyllic image was further tarnished. 3 more bodies were discovered, all in varying states of decay, scattered around the same wooded area near Pine Lake. Each victim bore signs of violent, gruesome deaths. The injuries were methodical, almost ritualistic, as if the killer were following a dark and twisted script. For a town like Clearwater, where crime was almost non-existent, the murders were incomprehensible. Panic set in quickly. Residents began locking their doors at night, something many had never done before. Parents stopped letting their children play outside unsupervised, and the local trails, once bustling with hikers, joggers, and bird watchers, became eerily deserted. The media caught wind of the story and descended on Clearwater, bringing with them a flood of reporters, news vans, and cameras. The killings were sensationalized, and the perpetrator was given a chilling nickname, the Minnesota Monster. The name stuck, amplifying the fear that already gripped the town. Local law enforcement, unaccustomed to dealing with crimes of this magnitude, found themselves overwhelmed. The small police force, led by Chief Paul Reynolds, worked tirelessly, but leads were scarce. The killer left behind no obvious evidence, no fingerprints, no DNA, no footprints. It was as if they vanished into thin air after each murder, leaving only their horrifying handiwork behind. The once happy town was now a community on edge. People whispered about the murders in hushed tones, speculating who might be responsible. Some suspected an outsider, while others feared the killer might be one of their own. The unease was palpable, a cloud of dread hanging over Clearwater. Despite the fear, life had to go on. People went to work, children attended school, and businesses stayed open. But the murders cast a long shadow, and Clearwater was no longer the same. The town's sense of safety and innocence had been stolen, leaving its residents to wonder, when would the Minnesota Monster strike again? The murders in Clearwater had become the town's darkest secret, one that no one wanted to acknowledge aloud yet couldn't escape. By the time the 3rd body was found, the similarities between the victims were impossible to ignore. Each one had suffered brutal injuries, and on every body was a strange symbol carved into the flesh, a mark that seemed both deliberate and ominous. Investigators were baffled. The symbol was unfamiliar, and efforts to decipher its meaning led to dead ends. Was it some sort of code, a calling card, or a warped signature left by the killer to claim their work? The media seized on this grisly detail, amplifying the fear gripping Clearwater. The mark became a focal point of speculation, with everyone from amateur sleuths to self-proclaimed experts offering theories. Some said it was tied to an ancient cult, while others suggested the killer had a background in the occult. None of these theories, however, brought the police closer to identifying the Minnesota Monster. With no solid leads, authorities turned to forensic experts, hoping the evidence would yield answers. But even the forensic analysis brought more questions than clarity. The crime scenes were meticulously clean. There were no fingerprints, no stray hairs, and no DNA left behind. What little evidence was found of peculiar adhesive on the victim's wrists and ankles was so obscure that it provided no immediate breakthroughs. It seemed the killer was not only careful but eerily methodical, as if they had rehearsed every step to avoid detection. The situation escalated when a local wildlife photographer inadvertently captured an image near one of the murder sites. The photograph, taken in the dense woods around Pine Lake, showed a figure in the distance, their face obscured by what appeared to be a crude mask. The figure was carrying something long and heavy, though the blurry quality of the image made it impossible to identify. When the photo was shared with the public, it only fueled the paranoia already spreading through Clearwater. Was this the Minnesota monster? The police considered the photo a potential breakthrough. They combed the surrounding woods, setting up checkpoints and canvassing nearby towns for anyone who might have seen the masked figure. Despite their efforts, the trail went cold. Whoever the Minnesota monster was, they seemed to thrive on remaining hidden. As the months dragged on, the people of Clearwater lived in a state of uneasy vigilance. The once busy trails remained deserted. Businesses suffered as tourists avoided the area, and local schools issued warnings about venturing too far from home. Some residents formed neighborhood watch groups, patrolling the streets at night with flashlights and radios. Still, the fear lingered, an oppressive weight that hung over the town. Then came the letter. Delivered anonymously to the Clearwater police station, it was written on plain white paper with blocky, uneven handwriting. The letter contained details about the murders that had never been made public, specific injuries, the positions of the bodies, even the type of rope used to bind the victims. At the bottom of the page was a chilling message: "You won't catch me. Not yet." It was a taunt, a calculated move to remind the town and its police force that the killer was always one step ahead. The letter was the first direct communication from the Minnesota monster, and it left everyone wondering just how far this predator would go before they were stopped. The arrival of the anonymous letter sent shockwaves through Clearwater. It wasn't just the gruesome details it revealed, it was the confidence, the sheer audacity of the message. The killer wasn't hiding in fear. They were watching, taunting, and feeding on the attention their crimes had generated. For the investigators, it was both a clue and a challenge, an unsettling reminder of how far they still were from catching the Minnesota monster. The letter was immediately sent for forensic analysis. Every inch of it was scrutinized: the paper, the ink, the handwriting. Experts worked tirelessly, looking for anything that could link it to a suspect. The results were frustratingly sparse. The handwriting appeared deliberately disguised, and there were no fingerprints or DNA. However, a breakthrough came when investigators discovered the paper used was a rare brand sold in only a handful of stores across Minnesota. It was a small lead, but in a case this complex, even the smallest thread could unravel the mystery. Detectives began visiting each store, pulling receipts and scouring surveillance footage. Weeks of painstaking work finally paid off when one store provided a receipt for the exact paper purchased just days before the letter was sent. Surveillance footage showed a man wearing a hooded jacket and sunglasses making the purchase. Though his face was partially obscured, his mannerisms and build provided a valuable profile. Meanwhile, the town's fear was reaching a breaking point. The idea that the killer could be someone local walking among them and observing their every move was unbearable. Rumors began to spread, with neighbors eyeing each other suspiciously. The sense of community that once defined Clearwater was crumbling under the weight of paranoia. As detectives pieced together the timeline of the murders, they noticed a pattern. Each victim had been last seen near or around wooded areas, often alone. The killer seemed to target those who were isolated, making it easier to strike without drawing attention. This insight prompted the formation of a task force focused on patrolling the forested regions around Clearwater. Officers set up trail cameras, deployed drones, and conducted nighttime sweeps, hoping to catch the killer in the act. The Minnesota monster, however, was always one step ahead. Despite the increased surveillance, there were no signs of activity. It was as if the killer had vanished, or perhaps they were simply waiting for the right moment to strike again. Then, another clue emerged. A team of officers reviewing old footage from trail cameras spotted something chilling: a masked figure walking through the woods, carrying what looked like a duffel bag. The footage was grainy and taken at night, but it confirmed the killer was still active. The bag, investigators theorized, could have contained tools or even a weapon. Determined not to lose momentum, the task force intensified their efforts. Undercover officers began posing as hikers, deliberately venturing into the woods alone to bait the killer. Patrols were increased, and the community was urged to remain vigilant. Despite their best efforts, the killer remained elusive. As weeks turned into months, frustration began to mount within the task force. The taunts, the careful planning, and the complete absence of mistakes made the Minnesota Monster a formidable adversary. It became clear to everyone involved that they weren't dealing with an impulsive criminal, but a calculated predator who thrived on control and manipulation. The case reached a boiling point when a second letter arrived at the police station. This one was shorter, but the message was just as chilling: "You're getting closer. I'm watching." It was clear the killer was not only aware of the task force's efforts, but seemed to enjoy the game. The hunt for the Minnesota Monster had turned into a battle of wits, and the stakes had never been higher. The second letter left no doubt that the Minnesota Monster was monitoring the investigation, toying with the authorities and relishing the fear they had created. The task force, now under immense pressure from both the community and the media, decided it was time to change their approach. Instead of chasing a phantom through the woods, they would set a trap to draw the killer out of hiding. It was a bold and risky plan, but with no other viable leads, they had little choice. The plan revolved around Pine Lake, the epicenter of the killer's activities. The police organized a highly publicized event, a community festival to reclaim the area from the grip of fear. On the surface, it was a cheerful gathering designed to restore a sense of normalcy, with food stalls, live music, and games. Behind the scenes, however, it was a carefully coordinated sting operation. Undercover officers blended into the crowd, disguised as festival goers. Plainclothes detectives patrolled the area, and hidden cameras were installed throughout the park. Snipers were stationed in the surrounding woods, and a command center monitored every inch of the festival grounds. The goal was simple: create an irresistible opportunity for the killer to strike. As the day of the festival approached, tension ran high. Residents were divided. Some saw the event as a step toward healing, while others feared it was a dangerous gamble. Nevertheless, the turnout was significant, with hundreds of people gathering at Pine Lake on a sunny Saturday afternoon. For hours, the festival unfolded without incident. Families enjoyed picnics, children played on the grass, and the music echoed through the trees. The task force remained vigilant, their eyes scanning the crowd for anything unusual. As the day wore on and the festival began to wind down, it seemed as though the killer might not take the bait. Then, as dusk settled over the lake, one of the undercover officers noticed a man lingering at the edge of the crowd. He was wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face and carrying a large duffel bag. Something about his behavior seemed off. He avoided eye contact, kept his distance from others, and appeared to be watching the crowd more than participating in the event. The officer discreetly signaled to the task force, and a group of plainclothes detectives moved in. As they approached, the man suddenly bolted, sprinting toward the woods with the duffel bag in hand. Chaos erupted as officers pursued him through the dense forest, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. The chase was tense and dangerous. The suspect navigated the terrain with alarming speed, as though he knew the woods intimately. Finally, after nearly half an hour, officers cornered him near a rocky outcrop. The man resisted, but he was quickly subdued and taken into custody. When the duffel bag was searched, its contents confirmed their worst fears. Inside were gloves, rope, duct tape, and a knife matching the wounds on previous victims. It was a horrifying yet vital breakthrough. The task force had captured someone who fit the profile of the Minnesota Monster. Back at the station, the suspect's identity was revealed: Gregory Kane, a local handyman who had lived in Clearwater for years. Quiet, unassuming, and known for doing odd jobs around town, Kane had blended into the community seamlessly. It was a shocking revelation, and the town struggled to reconcile the friendly man they thought they knew with the monster who had terrorized them. As news of the arrest spread, Clearwater began to feel a glimmer of hope for the first time in months. But even with Kane in custody, there were still questions to answer. Was he truly the Minnesota monster, or was there more to the story? Gregory Kane's arrest sent shockwaves through Clearwater. The friendly handyman, known for his quiet demeanor and willingness to help anyone in need, was now suspected of being the Minnesota monster. For the residents of the town, it was almost impossible to reconcile the image of the man they thought they knew with the horror of the crimes he was accused of committing. As detectives dug deeper into Kane's life, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, painting a chilling portrait of a calculated killer who had evaded capture for years. The search of Kane's home revealed undeniable evidence linking him to the murders. Hidden in the crawlspace beneath his modest house, police found what could only be described as a trophy room. Personal items belonging to the victims were meticulously arranged, each labeled with the date and location of their deaths. Journals were discovered, filled with pages of disturbing writings detailing his plans, his thoughts, and his twisted motivations. Most horrifying of all, the mask captured in the blurry photograph was found among his belongings, alongside tools that matched the injuries inflicted on the victims. The journals provided insight into Kane's mind, though they offered no comfort to those seeking answers. His writings revealed an obsession with control and a need to assert dominance over his victims. The carved symbol, which had baffled investigators for months, was a design of his own creation, a meaningless mark meant to strike fear and confuse those trying to track him down. He had chosen his victims at random, targeting those who were alone and vulnerable, believing their disappearances would cause the most panic. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Kane refused to cooperate. During his interrogations, he remained silent, offering no confessions or explanations. Prosecutors moved swiftly to build a case, knowing that the community needed closure. Forensic analysis confirmed that the tools found in Kane's possession were consistent with the wounds on the victims, and traces of the same rare adhesive discovered at the crime scenes were matched to a roll of tape in his workshop. As the trial approached, the media frenzy intensified. National outlets descended on Clearwater, eager to cover the story of the unassuming handyman-turned-monster. The courtroom was packed during the proceedings, with families of the victims seeking justice and closure for their unimaginable loss. The evidence presented was damning, leaving little room for doubt. Kane's defense team argued that the case was circumstantial, but the prosecution's meticulous presentation left the jury convinced. After a tense deliberation, Gregory Kane was found guilty on all counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Clearwater, the verdict marked the end of a nightmare. The town began the slow process of healing, though the scars left by Kane's crimes would never fully fade. Residents gradually returned to the trails and parks that had been abandoned in fear, reclaiming their community and their sense of security. The case of the Minnesota monster became a cautionary tale, a reminder that evil can hide in plain sight. While justice had been served, the shadow of Gregory Kane's actions lingered, a chilling testament to the darkness that had briefly consumed Clearwater.